With this, we come to the last session and the last talk of this meeting, but which is really important, and the crux of the meeting is the system change. I call upon Debra, who works as a co-director at the University of Washington and is a co-chair of Acute Pain Guideline Group at American Pain Society, to speak on from quality improvement to system change.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me to be able to participate in this meeting. This is one of my favorite meetings because I think it does give us a lot of food for discussion for the entire week and the entire year. Well, always a challenge to be the last speaker on the last day, especially this full of a day. Lots of really great talks. Certainly, I think opioids have been in the crosshairs of attention and fire for many years. Like most of you in this room, I've been in pain for quite a while and seen the pendulum shift in dramatic ways, and I hope that it comes back at a balanced, rational approach, because certainly opioids are needed. I thought I would try and find a good joke about being the last speaker, preventing you from our cocktail hour, but I couldn't find a really funny one, so I thought this was probably a better analogy. I'm kind of borrowing this from a colleague. I don't know if you guys have seen this bridge. It's in Honduras, or it was in Honduras. It was built in 1930 by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's one of the best bridges they had in that country. In 1998, Hurricane Mitch came along and was a horrific storm that tore up that country, pretty much took out all bridges in the entire country except this bridge. 75 inches of rain, 150 bridges destroyed, and loss of life. At the end of this hurricane, this bridge still stood. The problem is that the river was not where it used to be. So the analogy is it's really time for a better bridge. And I think that's kind of where we are in acute pain. If you think about, I've been in it 30 years now, all the work we've done to really build pain assessment and access to opioids and treatment, and now we're looking at enhanced recovery pathways and multimodal analgesia, so things are quite a bit different. We do have a good roadmap, though. I do think there is a bridge. This is probably 15 years old. It came out of the Institute of Medicine, but if you go back to this is really pretty good stuff. This is really the basics, right? Redesign care for best practice. Use our information technology, which we've been talking about today. We're just trying to get into that, right? We can't crack into how best to use IT and clinical decision-making support. How do we develop effective teams to work in different settings across transitions of care? How do we coordinate care? How do we measure performance? When do we measure it? What's the purpose of measurement? And improve workforce knowledge and skills. So kind of like Alan, I feel like this is really that systems change, is those original things. And the Institute of Medicine was, I think, the first group that said our attempts to improve quality is like trying to break the sound barrier by tinkering with the Model T Ford. We need disruptive innovations. We need radical new vehicles, kind of like Heather was saying about Don Berwick talking about instead of the automobile, we need an airplane. So today we've really been talking about opioids and how to tackle that, what's the right place to be at, and I think we've heard about all of these, right? How do we prevent safety issues? How do we integrate multimodal care? Lots of guidelines, lots of direction, lots of studies on how to do that, and then how do we put it into context? I remember very early on when we were moving from QA to QI, Mitchell Max was one of the first people that said, it's the context of the situation that you really have to look at. What's going on around all of this stuff? So I know this is an international meeting. I can only really speak to my personal experience locally, so I'll talk a little about what's happened or what I'm seeing happen in Seattle and in Washington. I moved there about 5 years ago in the midst of this opioid crisis there. It was the first and only state in the United States that took clinical guidelines and made them legislative rules. So the Agency for Medical Directors Guidelines became legislative rules. I don't know if you heard, about a month ago, we had a private pain center in the region closed down by the federal government, charged with 18 related deaths. We have 8,000 patients who are chronic opioid patients who lost all their care, all their prescriptions overnight. 4,500 of those on Medicaid, 200 pumps. So we've really been doing disaster Katrina planning because of how legislative rules have affected more scrutiny and now federal charges, and it's just really quite a messy situation. Last year in Washington, we did update these agency guidelines, and for the first time, we now have perioperative and acute phases. You know the Centers for Disease Control have new opioid guidelines in the United States in the last year, and lots of controversy about them saying that for acute pain, most people only need 2 to 3 days of opioids, rarely beyond 7 days. A lot of fluid activity about what does that mean for major surgeries, but if you read the CDC guidelines, they refer back to these Washington state guidelines, which say, kind of like everything, use the smallest dose for the shortest duration of care, but have really specifically said, do not send someone home with more than 2 weeks of opioids. And it's having a lot of repercussions. As well, the American Pain Society guidelines, as I mentioned today, reiterate no long-acting, no increase of long-acting, use short-acting oral PRN as the source of opioids for perioperative pain control. So when I moved to the University of Washington 5 years ago, I thought, wow, I'm going to Nirvana. This is the home for the field of pain management. I remember early on in my career having Brian Redding come and talk to us at the University of Wisconsin about acute pain services, the Benica model. And I think most people think of Seattle as this gorgeous University of Washington setting with Mount Rainier in the background, the Husky Stadium. We have 5 or 6 hospitals though, and my home is HARBORVIEW, which is the level 1 trauma hospital. It's not certainly in a gorgeous setting like the University of Washington is 3 miles from us. We hang over the I-5 interstate there. Under that interstate, starting just about a half a mile from HARBORVIEW, is what's called the jungle. We have 3,000 homeless people that have lived there for up to 4 or 5 years. We serve 20% of the landmass of the United States as the level 1 trauma center. So when Obama is in town, we have one of our ORs reserved in case there's a trauma. But if you jump out of a window being chased by a police officer in Alaska and fracture your ankle, you are airlifted to HARBORVIEW. It feels like an international area. We serve 67 languages as a port of major entry into the United States. We are a patient safety net hospital, so we have a specific mission to patients who are homeless, have victims of domestic violence and torture. I would say 2/3 of our acute pain service on a daily basis are active IV heroin users. And I think an example of the complexity is just a few weeks ago, one of our patients, 40-year-old on heroin with lots of chronic problems as a result of that. Turns out that he was started on heroin when he was 11 years old by his handler in Somalia when he was forced to be a child soldier. We had another lady who has been trying to get into treatment, and unfortunately, she has a partner that has physically restrained her and injected her against her will. So the context of the situation of the patients and the complexity of their psychosocial situation is really quite incredible. So looking back at your hospital, at our hospital, we really have tried to say, do we have a system in place? How do you coordinate the care for some of these patients? What are their risks for opioid safety, whether it's respiratory depression or misuse and abuse? And like everybody in the country, and I think probably in the world, there's a complex, high utilizer group of people that are very vulnerable with mental health, substance use disorder. So this is kind of what we've done over the last year and a half. I've been very lucky. We have a new chief that I work with, Dr. Ivan Lesnick, who came from the Department of Defense and has quite a lot of experience and interest in looking at systems. So this is our integrated pain care program. So we've taken what was the traditional acute pain service, anesthesiology-based, with a nurse and anesthesiologists, and a couple of chronic outpatient clinic days that was based on the provider. And we really transformed our acute pain service. It's very interprofessional. We have addiction medicine, we have spiritual care, we have a pain pharmacist, and we have a rehab psychologist in addition to PAs, anesthesiologists, and an advanced practice nurse. We have a clinical operations committee that utilizes our pain resource nurses, really looking at systems improvement, kind of implementation, science, quality improvement. And then we have the clinical services, where we've embedded our pain specialists not only in the pre-anesthesia clinic, but also now in our 2 adult medicine primary care clinics a couple of days a week, where they help support the primary care providers and those patients. So really embedding this pain expertise across the continuum of care. I think if I had to summarize it though, or sum it up, these are really the 3 main strategies that we are focused on that I think are very helpful, and that is interprofessional team, developing that. Looking at pathways of care and looking at managing care transitions, which is the handout that I just gave you, because obviously this is way too much and too little to see, but when we've tried to kind of map it out, I really wanted to let you know that we're really looking at that systems change from before patients come to the hospital all the way through back to primary care, and really highlight this section on the next slide. This is really looking at some of that care transition in the pre-op clinic, using some additional screening, looking at the role of the pain pharmacist as well as the rehab psychologist. Beth Darnell has been very generous with their time. We have a new young rehab psychologist in pain, very helpful in terms of taking what's happening in terms of research and really trying to do some local experimentation with it and try to see how we can make it work where we are. This is really to look at more that care mapping, and again, I wanted to pull out, this is kind of routine practice now in our pre-anesthesia clinic. All patients get screened by the nurses and the anesthesiologists there to see if they're at high risk for either uncontrolled pain or opioid problems. That's been systematized so that they get automatically put into the inpatient acute pain service so the resident knows the day that they're admitted, and we can reach out and take care of them, as well as look at what we can do preoperatively. So we've just started to do this in REDCap, again with some of Dr. Darnell's advice, do some additional screening when patients are in the pre-anesthesia clinic to try and look at some of those cutoffs for when they may need some additional input or could benefit from some preoperative visits by either the rehab psychologist or the pharmacist. And then again, this is just trying to look at, making decisions when patients are on buprenorphine. That's one of the major strategies of the CDC, is to increase the use of buprenorphine, which has a whole level of unintended consequences, I think, in trauma hospitals and in pre-planned surgeries, about what you do with those patients. So we have a list of evolving measures. We use measures to help us stimulate quality improvement. We use them to help justify resources for our integrated pain care program. We obviously have to do some measurement for accreditation and performance. These are fluid, they change. They're not something that you're going to ever have exactly. We're doing a couple of local studies. We're calling patients 2 weeks after hospital discharge to see how much opioid do they have left, what did they do with it, did they get information about how to safely use and dispose of it. We're looking at our use of methadone to stabilize patients' cravings and withdrawal and engage them into treatment, because we're using a lot of methadone in patients that come in that have active substance use disorder, and how does that look, and how does it work with the local treatment programs. So this is my second to last slide. It's a lot of words. If you'll just give me 2 seconds to read some of it, I would highly recommend you take a look at this. This was a 3-page article in the New England Journal of Medicine in August, and it really summarized, I think, the hard work of transforming healthcare. Examination of organizations that have achieved and sustained substantial performance improvements reveal that lasting transformation requires the relentless hard work of local operational redesign. Yes, the senior oversight group is responsible for establishing teams and setting priorities and addressing it. But really, change occurs from internal redesign work. It's a long series of local experiments. Transformers have invested in creating widely understood set of unifying values and norms. When these teams redesign local structures and processes, they do more than write a best practice protocol. They also configure the workflow, the workforce, supporting technologies, and even the physical delivery of sites. And data is often an Achilles heel. Few doctors believe that they have the adequate data for systems redesign. Transformers, however, do the best they can with the available information, recognizing that data will improve over time. And again, the short-term investments that are required can be surprisingly small because most organizations already have those resources. The most substantial hurdle is change in the mindset. So it has been done in other settings. This is an example in Minnesota where they've looked at these 5 things about coordination of care, medication management, patient and family engagement, and have avoided almost 8,000 readmissions, and at least theoretically said they've saved $70 million. So thanks for your attention. We'll have discussion.
Thank you, Deb. What we will do, we'll take up the questions during the cocktail reception. So this concludes this particular scientific feast. Before we disperse for our cocktail reception, may I request them to have some of the concluding remarks, and may I request him to call speakers and the chairperson for a group photograph. Dan, can I have some concluding remarks from you?
Thank you very much, Babita. I think we've been extremely fortunate today to have experts running the entire spectrum of just about every issue that's connected with the question of whether post-operative opioids are now obsolete. What I've taken away from today is, first of all, as we often find out when you pose a question like that, like, does acupuncture work? Or who is, the first thing is you have to examine the question and say, for which procedures, in which patients, under which conditions. And we've seen there's a great deal of heterogeneity, but there's also a great deal of promise. I'm grateful to each of the speakers. I especially found it intriguing to hear about what may be on the horizon in terms of the transcription factor decoy or the soluble hydroxylase inhibitor. These are very exciting. We'll see what happens. But I thought that each of the contributors brought a unique perspective, and although this is a small group, we like it to be a small group, and I've said to people, we hadn't requested such a big room. We were more planning for 40 or 50 and ordered the meals accordingly. But I don't think having a bigger room altered the very collegial and welcoming tone that has been maintained by everyone. So I'm very grateful for the moderators and timekeepers, grateful for the people who have contributed a lot. I will first call a special round of applause to Bob Cohen, who's been scurrying around getting all kinds of media things done, and these will appear in the next issue of the newsletter. So first, a round of applause for Bob. Two or three things. The first is we'd like to take a group photo of any of the presenters and moderators here today. And we have the great good fortune that the president of IASP, Rolf Detlef-Trita, is here and has been watching the last part of this and seeing for himself. So he was welcome to join us and we'll go off to our cocktail reception. The other thing is not to forget that Wednesday, I think it is from, let me get the hour straight for our business meeting. We will have elections because our terms are over. It will be 6:30 to 7:30 in this building, just near here in room 302. So for those members of the SIG or people who want to be, especially those who want to hold office or leave office, please come to the business meeting because we have to conduct this officially. Last point before we assemble for the photo, those who have been reading the various IASP communications will see that the theme for the Global Year Against Pain in 2017 is Pain After Surgery. We're doing this collaboratively with the European Federation of IASP chapters, And so that will be another interesting thing that we will inform and welcome the involvement of our SIG members in as we go further in our planning. So thank you, everyone. It's really been a great day. I think it's a great tone and spirit of collegiality, and now we can also do some networking. But first we'll take a photo, and we really appreciate the people who've come from so far. Thank you.
Okay, extension, 1, 2, 3. Beautiful.